was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom, boom. I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Welcome. We're so excited to begin season 2 of Peace with Penny. It also happens to be the International Day of Peace, and what better way to celebrate than sharing peace organizations of Israelis and Palestinians who work together on peace that are supported by the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Unfortunately, it also aligned with Sukkot. So if you're celebrating Sukkot tonight with your family, we hope you're enjoying your time in the sukkah, and you can always view the recording later at www.penny.com under podcasts or on the Peace with Penny Facebook page. We hope you'll also join us live next Tuesday when we'll be interviewing Rabbi Dr. Ron Kronish, the founding director of the Interreligious Coordinating Council in Israel, or ICCI. We've got so many accomplished guests who work on peace lined up in these next weeks, like Rabbi Dr. Kronish and Bishop Dr. Muniq Younan. And our first guest is Huda Abuarquob, regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. It's one thing to learn history from books, but to hear a person's own experiences is gripping, and we're grateful to Huda and our other guests for taking the time to speak with us. We learned so much about how peacemakers are going about their heartfelt work in season 1. It's been an honor, and I feel a blessing that these angels on earth work so diligently to promote peace between Israelis and Palestinians. This is not something commonly discussed on our local news, and we feel it's essential that people know that beyond the violence we hear about, there actually are neighbors providing hope to Israelis and Palestinians working on peace. So let's get started. Huda Abuarquob is the first on-the-ground regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, or ALLMEP, a network of more than 150 civil society organizations working in conflict transformation, development, and coexistence in the Middle East among Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, and Jews. I'm excited that in the weeks ahead, we'll be interviewing a number of ALLMEP members. Huda has years of experience in conflict transformation, NGO leadership, and social change education and activism, as well as a lifelong commitment to building strong people-to-people relations across conflicts. So welcome, Huda. It's an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Penny. It's mutual.
when someone embarks on peace work, one thing I've learned is that you have to put your big girl panties on and be willing to listen respectfully to what may be another person's point of view that can be disturbing and challenge your own personal beliefs. So just a warning to our listeners, be prepared to confront opinions different than your own during our broadcasts. The opinions of those interviewed are their own, and Peace with Penny does not necessarily agree, but we believe it's essential that we listen to everyone's viewpoint. After all, conflicts like these are between those often considered enemies, not friends. As a person, Huda, and specifically as a Palestinian, how did you prepare yourself to hear an Israeli perspective, which likely may be filled with a narrative that conflicts with your own beliefs and sometimes personal experiences?
Again, thank you, Penny. And I wished that this day would be celebrated when everyone will live in peace. And for me, as the regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, which is a network of 150 or more organizations that does that kind of courageous conversation, you need to come to the room carrying all the courage that you have in order to counterpoint some of the opinions that either imposed on you by the way you were educated or raised, or by the way that you need to protect yourself. So you come into the room and you wear the hat of whoever that you think you represent, and never you bring your own self to it. And I come to the room knowing that this is the case with the Israelis. They come from a place of fear and collective trauma that has been invested very well by different systems in order to keep them on their toes, keep them not trusting the other or any other in any case, not just the Palestinians. When you use a collective trauma, which is, the Holocaust is one of the worst atrocities that was committed by human beings against other human beings because they are simply different, and it lives through the bones and blood of every Jewish person that I met. Even if they want to fight it, still they come to the room carrying that baggage of trauma, that baggage of fear. And for me, as a Palestinian who believes that I have so much power, as someone who believes in her rights to exist on the land, to liberate herself from the dominant narratives, to liberate others in the process, I come to the room with that sense of power that would give me enough courage to not only transform myself in this process, but also transform the other. Because at the end of the day, to me, this is a co-work. It's not coexistence as much as I call it co-resistance of all the demons that are out there that want us to be enemies. And one, as a person who survived all kinds of, so-called terror, I wake up every morning asking myself, why do I do this work? Why I put myself in that situation? Why would I listen to people who sometimes do not even acknowledge my existence, and who want to take this conflict to 5,000 years ago, when we are now killing each other for a piece of land that is supposed to be holy? So I bring that to the room, and I come with that courage and understanding and power of recognition of my own, but recognition of the other's pain. And from there, some real conversations happen. But I don't believe that it's just happening for the sake of conversation. I'm a firm believer of moving this dialogue to action that can actually transform our communities.
Would you also acknowledge that there's plenty of fear and in your own community, in with the Palestinians? It's the fear and I would really call it PTSD on both sides, that both sides have lived with unbelievable trauma. And so there's also, both sides have trauma and the feeling of terror that's happened to them from the other. And it's a very complicated situation.
I, I, I don't just acknowledge it, I live it, Penny. It's
Yes.
something that you live every minute. I hate nights in Palestine because they are always charged with terror at night, raids of Israeli army coming to my hometown to arrest Palestinians, tear gas, bullets, and I run from one window to another to close it because I live with my mom who's sick and vulnerable. I fear for my nephews and nieces, 33 of them, who wake up in the middle of the night screaming their heads off. The danger is not the fact that it happens. The danger is that it becomes normal and we adapt. And when we adapt, then this becomes part of our reality on daily basis. And all we need to do is to survive it and not work to change it, which makes us go to the comfort zone that is called victimhood. Both the Israelis and Palestinians fight all the time over who is more victim than the other. This victimhood fight or competing narratives of victimhood are paralyzing for both. But I have to admit that the Palestinians always find ways to be resilient. And this is what I want to invest in, and especially women. Because there is this survivor instinct that lead women in order to change the environment around them. I do have to acknowledge that with adaptation comes a huge risk of accepting, which is sometimes very paralyzing to people who are seeking to change their life to a better life, a dignified kind of existence.
Yeah, when you mentioned that night, it reminded me of our trip. During the day, well, not always during the day. Sometimes we had to go to bomb shelters during the day too, but mostly at night, from the other side, we had bombs coming into Israel, and we ran to bomb shelters. And I hear you. Like I said, on both sides, this terror is happening. Do you think coexistence is possible, and what do you think is preventing it?
Well, it is, last May was a reminder of how we live as, ordinary Palestinians and Israelis who have fears and have aspirations, with the fact that I didn't have a shelter. I don't. And I literally feel that at that moment I'm paralyzed. And I carry that trauma from 1982 when Sabra and Shatila massacre in Lebanon happened. I am always in that place. So I want people who hear us to know that this terror, and again, I'll use quote unquote, is practiced by structural institutions that use structural violence on people who have nothing to defend themselves with. And if there are people who celebrate that violence, they celebrate it because it kind of creates that sense of insecurity on both sides. And yes, we are insecure in our homes, in the streets. I drive to Bethlehem every morning to go to Jerusalem, and you don't know what will you face on Road 60. This is one of the most infamous roads that teaches me that it could be one of the 7th impossible things in the world to do coexistence. When you see these settlements that we as Palestinians refer to as cancer because they spread and they look like ghettos, and people there are very angry all the time, and of course they feel insecure, so they think that they are entitled to defending themselves, cutting roads and changing, if I want to get to Ramallah, I need 4 hours, when in the past, before the wall and checkpoints and settlements, security, bypass roads, it took us 90 minutes, one and a half hour. And now I have to go through the valley of hell to get to Jerusalem. And with all of that coming, that reminder that one party does not want to exist with the other, and the other has to feel that all the time that they are the victims, they are the receiving end of that imposing realities on the ground. If you take a trip through the West Bank or go to Hebron, my hometown, downtown, and you see that kind of 90-degree of separation or 60-degree of separation, you know that the word coexistence loses its meaning. Unfortunately, also in May, that word that was created for the shared society within Israel between the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel and the Palestinian and the Jewish people who are citizens of Israel also kind of lost its meaning. You know, years of working on coexistence concept put people in a place where they found each other facing each other as enemies that inside Israel. And so we need to find another concept in order to define peace building in Palestine and in Israel. The people who take life risks in order to meet and make sure that we can build enough trust among ourselves and address that trauma in order to find a form of existence that accepts us both in a dignified way. We need to find that term soon, inshallah, and we're working on it. But I don't think the realities on the ground is supportive of what is called coexistence.
What made you decide to work on peace?
Because I have no other option. This is the only option that empowers me as a human being who believes in her right to live in a dignified, safe, secured life that can reach its potential, that should not accept the fact that she is a victim, should not accept the fact that she is the underdog. She should not accept the fact that she is occupied, that she has rights just like any other person in the world to live in the place that she calls home. I engage in this work because I do believe that at the end of the day, the Israelis also want the same, but the institutions that represent both are working on a different channel, which is competition over a piece of land that we both did it wrong. And for me, I engage in this work because of the next generation. We had a chance to find our path through different ways to create that potential for us to fully live a dignified life. But the new generation is not, and we're not listening to them, and we're not hearing them. And for me, the Israelis who were born in this land, in my brain, they are Palestinians. They belong to this place. But they have to find a way to embrace the place in a way that does not threaten another group of people and ignites even more fear and feeds more terror. For me, peace is the only way, because we tried every other way and it didn't work. We didn't disappear. The Palestinians did not simply disappear. The story about them that they didn't exist didn't stand alone. We're here and we know that we exist on this place. So we better find a way in order to either dignify that existence on this land, find ways to partner equally on it, or we will lose it. We both will lose it.
It was a very long time before you really had any interaction with Israelis. Can you talk about your interactions? I believe it happened in Vienna.
Yeah, it was after Oslo. And it was also, you know, the only form of Israelis we've known growing up as children and teenagers is the soldiers. And I had incidents in my life that always reminded me that the Israelis are all soldiers and their mission is to kill. and the world is not seeing or witnessing, and it's completely biased against us, including the Arab world. My parents lived in Saudi Arabia, in which they were accused of leaving the land and have no honor because they left the land, and they were not refugees. They were simply sent to Saudi Arabia to create an educational system in Saudi Arabia, and still they were accused by other Arabs that they have no honor because they left Palestine to the Jews. And we live now in a different reality. But to me, it wasn't about meeting the Israelis who are not soldiers, because I knew that all Israelis, because it's mandatory in Israel for women and men to be in the Israeli army. It was chasing that thing in your brain that there are people out there who want to kill you, and the monster is just behind the wall. And I just needed to get rid of that image because I wanted to feel that I can change that. And in 1997, there was a program created for teachers from Palestine and Israel, with the blessings of the leadership from both sides, for the Palestinians and Israelis to meet in a third environment, in a different environment, facilitated by other people. And for my amazement, first of all, this is the first time I see Israelis who are not wearing M16s and their faces are covered. And for me, they were just like us. Many of them looked like me. I didn't see the colors, like I didn't see that I was brown and they were white. And when we started talking about the challenges we are facing in the educational system, it was almost the same. So we clicked on that human level that was purposed towards creating a different educational system that gets the kids in Palestine and Israel a place where they can find their own or define their own identity. And since then, I engaged in this work on many levels. When the leadership was supportive of it, and many other entities within Palestine were supportive of it, until the second Intifada started and everything collapsed. I was one of the people who sent Israeli soldiers from Beit Lahem with olive wreaths and roses. We had hope at the time. First time we've seen the Palestinian flag raised on a Palestinian school, when it was a crime to raise it just a few months before. And I didn't want to lose that. I'm still holding to that kind of hope. I'm still holding to the place where there is full recognition of the Palestinians' right to exist on the same place that they call home. So that's why, for me, I started stripping Israelis off of their soldier gear and seeing the human beings. And boy, those human beings were young, frightened, scared, feeling that that the Holocaust is going to happen again. I heard that from Israelis more than once. And the Arabs are going to be the ones who commit that Holocaust. And to me, this was wrong on so many levels. And I wanted to tackle that. I wanted to tackle those dominant narratives that stripped us away from who we are really as human beings.
Many of your fellow Palestinians have turned to violence. What kept you from joining them?
I would object to the word many, because that's one of the ways to label the Palestinians and make them look like the villains and the bad guys all the time.
I apologize. Some.
No, you don't have to, but it just making sure that when you live constantly under the same kind of condition, when you cross checkpoints and the first thing that is attacked, your pride and your dignity, and how this is important for people like us coming from collective cultures. When you know that you're not safe inside your home, your immediate reaction is to defend that sense of dignified being. And armed resistance is one of the ways that the Palestinians resorted to, although they don't have the means to it compared to other factions or other conflict zones. Yet we are still being labeled as, Hamas Hamas's existence in Palestine made us look like Al-Qaeda or Daesh, you know, all those extreme religious groups that kill people with no mercy, etc. And I am someone who's against violence in all of its forms, including structural violence that come from states or organizations like Hamas. But I don't want everyone to know that this is the only way to respond to the violence that we are living under. We should acknowledge the fact that the Palestinians are also experiencing violence on daily basis in so many ways, even water rights, even land confiscation, even access and movement. These are all forms of violence that are not recognized by the international community and very underestimated when it comes to how they affect us. We are just violent by nature. This is what the world says about us. I'm sorry, I don't accept that. The only thing that kept us surviving on this land is the fact that we responded all the time non-violently. There was a lot of programs invested in by the Europeans and the Americans in order to tame the Palestinians, to spend a lot of money on non-violence communication and training for the Palestinians. But at the same time, it was not done the same for the Israelis who come from militarized communities. And in that case, this balance was imbalanced. And I have to say that we all experience violence in different ways. And we have to acknowledge the fact that we respond to violence also in many ways. I just think that violence makes me feel powerless, makes me feel desperate, makes me feel blind, and I'm not that kind of person. And I don't want any Palestinian to lose their focus when it comes to how they choose to resist the occupation. I want them to exist, because our success story as Palestinians is existence. And existence didn't happen because we chose death. It happened because we chose life.
You have an impressive education, including being a Fulbright scholar. Can you tell us about your journey to educate yourself about conflict resolution narratives and peace building?
I see that after 1997, being a teacher, faced and also working on the first ever curriculum for the Palestinians, who always are being accused of using violence in their books when the world doesn't know that the Palestinians didn't even have their own books. I studied in a Jordanian system, applied in the West Bank, and my colleagues from Gaza studied the Egyptian curriculum. And after 1997, when the Palestinian Authority came to Palestine, and the first ministry they had control of transferred to them from the Israelis, it was the Ministry of Education. And I worked on the curriculum. And one of the challenges that we were facing is that the curriculum that we chose, with a lot of scrutiny and monitoring from the international community, did not reflect reality on the ground. Our kids were going through schools. We were teaching them in civic education about the other and the respect of the other. We were not allowed to use the map because it's still one of the unresolved issues in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation and peace process. And then the kids would go to school and they ask us, who is the other? The other is the soldier who's going through our bags when we cross from one place to another and swear at our moms. What is it that you want us to believe in? And I wanted to have answers to that. So I started working on my Fulbright scholarship for 2 years, getting all the exams that I need to do, writing all the essays that I had to. And I ended up at Eastern Mennonite University in the Conflict Transformation, Justice and Peace Education program as a Fulbright student. And when I was there in 2004 and the war on Iraq happened, the students wanted to organize a demonstration against Americans' involvement in Iraq. And I, as a Palestinian, I didn't know that I have the right to do that protest But the Fulbright team there told me that you live in a free country and you have the right to express your opinions. And that was to me a new thing. From there, I started learning more about what it means to be a state, a person who believes, who lives in a state, who holds a passport, who is not a stateless. There are some privileges come with that state, and I wanted to support a Palestinian state. And so I seeked that kind of education in order to bring it back to Palestine. And unlike many of the Palestinians who choose never to come back to Palestine because they lose hope, I chose to come back to Palestine because I find hope. Every time I work with people here, I find hope.
In speaking with you and other peacemakers, it seems the basics of treating each other with respect is such an impactful message, seeming so elusive in interactions between Israelis and Palestinians. The other challenges of not speaking the same language and often never speaking to one another, even though they live so close, are glaring issues that cause so much unnecessary grief. What's been your experience of these things?
So when you in this peace, in the peace building space or trust building space, you have actually many people who go against you because it doesn't go with the norm. The norm here is we are enemies and we should fight each other on both sides. And they will never accept us. They will never let us live on this land. Like it's a mirror. It's like a reflection of two mirrors of one person. But to me, I think the power that I feel I have is that what I've learned from teachers all over the world is the power of engagement. Because you cannot just build walls and expect that the other will think that you are a good person. They will always think that you are after them. And when you build that wall, it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's intellectual, it's everything. It makes you feel that you are the other. And the whole otherization process is feeding into that institution of militarized structural violence that used by both sides. And I do believe that the courageous thing to do in a conflict zone is to take down these walls. And for me as a Palestinian, this is part of the resiliency factor that keeps the Palestinian going on and not resorting all to despair, is the fact that we have the power as human beings to take down these walls and make the world see us and acknowledge our rights in a dignified way. Because, you know, I insist on using the word dignity because this is really, really important. Human dignity is the factor that gets people to feel powerful enough to change the dynamics of any conflict. And if we keep putting people down and treating them as they are subhuman beings, they will always resort to ways to survive. And these ways are not always successful. And for me, it's important as a Palestinian to keep that sense of resiliency and hope and hopeful sense of living, because I want Palestine to be a state that is democratic, powerful, and had young people in it who want to build institutions rather than building walls. And I think that is the power of being in the room with others. Not only the Israelis who are on the left side of politics, who speak the same language of freedom and justice, etc. I think it's important to be in the room with those who don't even acknowledge your existence, because once they see you, they know that it's very difficult for them to just dismiss you, and they realize that the narrative that they were raised on is incomplete, and the narrative should have the other in it. And I always, I am a strong believer in the Jewish values, and I do believe that people like Abraham Joshua Heschel is an example for the Jewish people to follow, and I want him to be known to the youth, the Jewish Israeli youth, to know that there was someone who took had enough courage to stand by Martin Luther King and walk with him and get beaten while walking with him and get all the Jewish community to support the civil rights movement in the United States. And this is the vision I see. You know, I will see the Palestinians and the Israelis marching together in order to liberate themselves both from everything that wants to keep them apart.
Well, that's a good segue into talking about ALLMEP and your different organizations. First, I wanted to show a clip of ALLMEP. So this will be about 5.5 minutes, and we'll see about ALLMEP and your work.
A Palestinian sniper killed my son David.
An Israeli soldier shot and killed my 10 years old daughter, Abir.
When I take the bus, my parents are afraid that there might be a terrorist attack.
Jewish extremists tried to burn down my school.
With decades of division, conflict, and unsuccessful peace efforts, fear and mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians, especially among the youth, has never been greater. This is the reality that ALLMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace, seeks to change. ALLMEP is a coalition of over 125 organizations and tens of thousands of Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Arabs, building the civic foundations for peace. We foster cooperation within the peace-building field and advocate to governments around the world that they should invest greater resources toward our members' work. One ALLMEP member is the Parents' Circle.
To commemorate David's name, I work with Palestinians for peace.
To commemorate Abir's name, I work with Israelis for peace.
The Parents' Circle is an organization of more than 600 Palestinian and Israeli families who have lost loved ones in the conflict. Together, they work for peace, for a future where no other family will have to experience such loss.
I think standing on a stage all over the world and in Israel and Palestine, together with a Palestinian partner, for me, is the most effective way. Because if we who have suffered can stand on the stage and are the least likely people to do this, then surely that's an example to other people.
In fact, especially because we share the same pain. We lost our kids, and we discovered that in their name, our revenge is to make peace.
Hand in Hand is another member of ALLMEP. It's a network of bilingual schools and communities in Israel where Jewish and Arab children and their families live and learn together.
Most Jewish kids in Israel don't ever get to meet Arabs, but we get to see each other every day.
It's really good that we can just sit in the same class and learn together and actually have fun together. It's easier to fear and to hate when you don't know each other.
Through Olive Oil Without Borders, business partnerships produce more than just profits.
If it wasn't for Olive Oil Without Borders, I would never meet Palestinians. And meeting them, seeing that we are very similar, gives me hope for the future.
من خلال العمل المشترك الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي إحنا بنربح أنفسنا وبنربح السلام للجميع.
ALLMEP has so far unlocked over $130 million in government funding for Palestinian and Israeli peace builders. That has driven real change on the ground and impacted tens of thousands of lives. But we need to reach millions. That's why ALLMEP is expanding its efforts and looking to models that have worked elsewhere. Northern Ireland. There too, fear and mistrust had never been greater. After decades of division and conflict, trust between Catholics and Protestants was shattered. To most people, peace was an impossibility. Yet, the impossible was overcome. A peace agreement was signed. It holds to this day. How? By building from the bottom up. The International Fund for Ireland, a little-known strategic fund, invested over $1 billion starting 12 years before a peace deal, in what the UK's chief negotiator said was the great unsung hero of the peace process. It built trust and sustains peace to this very day. It's time to bring this successful model to the Middle East and establish an international fund for Israeli-Palestinian peace. This isn't just an idea. Thanks to a decade of ALLMEP's advocacy, the fund was endorsed by the UK government, and the United States government has now enacted legislation promising $250 million over 5 years toward the fund, representing the largest ever investment in Israeli-Palestinian peace building. While this is a start, it isn't enough. We need your support to bring more countries on board, so the resources available to those working for peace match the scale of the challenge. And then the thousands can become millions.
We can build trust.
We can work together.
We will make peace.
We will make peace.
We will make peace together with your support. Help us make the International Fund for Israeli-Palestinian Peace a reality.
Your video begins with Rabbi Daneman, who started your clip from Parent Circle. We've already interviewed her and others from Parent Circle. When you started working with ALLMEP, you only had 65 member organizations, and you've grown it to nearly 160. Can you talk about your work in growing your membership?
I think the reason behind it is the fact that ALLMEP approved itself as an agent of support for the marginalized peace-building community, both in Palestine and Israel. And the international fund that was talked about in this video, it's actually became a law in the United States, and we secured $250 million. The first call for application just went out a few days ago, and we deliver. So as an entity, as a network, as an umbrella organization that houses those organizations under, we deliver what we promise. And this is really the reason why people keep feeling hopeful, supported, and want to be part of ALLMEP, because on the ground also here, they don't feel that they are alone. I am with Robi when she wants to do a demonstration or get on a Zoom call to do fundraising. I'm with Bassam doing the same thing. I'm with hundreds and thousands of Israelis, and I'm tomorrow going to be with Women Wage Peace in a demonstration of mothers who want our leaders to sit on the table and end the conflict once for all. So ALLMEP is not just an idea, it's not an office in DC or in Paris, it's also human beings who take the risk to move through checkpoints or go to see areas to meet and continue that conversation. And as Robi said, this is not a work that you take for granted. This is not a nice work. This is a necessary work that people actually take risks to do it. The shrinking space of peace in Palestine and Israel is a huge factor for why we are not having more people joining. The fact that people lose hope when it comes to Israel and Palestine, especially here on the ground, is one of the reasons why people don't believe that there will be a solution. The polarization in the world because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, using it as a reason to commit acts of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia in Europe and in the United States, are all factors that threaten us as a community. But ALLMEP comes into the picture, does the necessary work by advocating for this work, also fighting these issues of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. When Israelis and Palestinians speak, when people who lost their children to the conflict come together and still have the courage and the hope to talk about peace, and you see the world is polarized and using the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in order to commit atrocities against each other, then that's a reason for ALLMEP to continue to do this work. And that's one of the reasons, of many reasons, why people want to join ALLMEP, because we deliver.
What types of organizations participate in ALLMEP?
Not only dialogue organizations, because people think people-to-people work is about 20 Palestinians and 20 Israelis sitting in the room and eating hummus. No, it's serious work that tackles the ecosystem, tackles water rights, direct action. People who have been our members, combatants for peace, had people, Israelis and Palestinians, who have been arrested 2 days ago because they were fighting for water rights in the South Hills of Hebron. We have organizations that provides, when it comes to health, taking people from cross checkpoints to get health services inside Jerusalem. You have people who do research that supports that kind of work. You have schools that brings Israelis and Palestinians together who enable them to create their own narrative there rather than being a product of divided narratives. It's serious on many levels. And the most serious part of it is that it's not easy to be done. It's not easy to be done. It's not like about you, Robi and Bassam are sitting together in a nice hotel. They had to cross checkpoints. They had to come to places where security is fragile in order to meet. And so for the people who think that this is nice, I'm telling them it's dangerous. It's one way to do resistance. There is no shame of being a peace building, because peace is not easy, but we will make it, just like the kids of Hand in Hand said that we will make peace. They said it because they believe they can make it, and we want to be there for them when they make it.
You have Israeli and Palestinian women working together under Feminist Inclusive Political Activism, FIPA. Can you talk about what that is? And you followed some specific principles when working with one another. What are they?
So one of the issues of the peace building field in general is the fact that it's not inclusive. And it's normally people who believe in peace, who are left-leaning when it comes to politics, but it's not open to others who are not. And one of the spaces that it's not, did not include women is also the peace building. So in 2015, we were working with an organization now called Tomorrow's Women, Palestinian Israeli women, decided that it's about time for us to be more inclusive when it comes to peace building. And it's about time for us to bring feminist principles, in a sense that we're not going to push men to the sea or otherize them, but we want them to be partners. And also we want to create a model for the new generation, a model of leadership that is based on feminist concepts. Again, it's not against men, but it also includes no shaming, no blaming. It gives more creativity for women to do this work. It brings women to leadership levels within these organizations. And we've managed to do that. We call ourselves FIPAs, and it was the reason why we created many women's groups within these organizations. And from there also started tackling issues that has to do with safeguarding in these environments. You cannot be doing dialogue and not practicing it when it comes to conflict. We believe that conflict is a good thing. It's not always a bad thing, because it shows the injustice, the injustice underlying many of the relationships. And when you talk about these injustices, you actually improve these relationships. So these are some of the principles of FIPA, Feminist Inclusive Political Activism. But also, one of the issues that we always thought that it should not be part of the conversation is religion. And you cannot be in Israel and Palestine and think God is only the problem. You should bring God into the solution space. And this is one of the ways to build women's resiliency in a conflict zone, that we need to believe in a power that is higher than us, but it's not gendered. And so that's one of the principles that we work on.
During the pre-interview, we talked about many of the religions can be very paternalistic, and how with that belief system that some of the women really struggled when you used she as referring to God instead of he. You want to talk a little bit about that? That was interesting.
Yeah, and I want everyone to have an open heart and open brain when they listen to this, because there's no way that as a woman of faith that I would insult God that is for me light. God for me is light. But in the language, it's gendered and it's always referred to in masculine ways. And so in women's brains, when you mention the word God or Allah, normally it's the image of a frowning giant, unsatisfied man, in many cases with carrying weapons or etc. But it's not that, that spirit that comes from light, that spirit that accepts and helps even the ones who have no faith. Still, God has a place in its tent to bring everyone together. So I use the shocking terminology here by referring to God as a she. And then I hear women saying, Huda, you cannot use the she, it's God. And it's like, so take a moment here and think of that God can be a he, but cannot be a she. Then you accept the fact that you are less. By going against the use of she instead of he to refer to God, you actually accept the fact that you are less than men. And from there, all kinds of conversations start. And for me, God is not gendered and should not be gendered. The limitations of language is one way of looking at how this actually affects our spiritual being. And I want to reclaim that space. So we created programs where we looked up women's stories in the 3 holy books and reclaimed them. And that was really, really helpful for many women to reclaim that spiritual space and that spiritual connection to God that doesn't judge, God that listens, accepts, and loves. And it's all because I firmly believe that God is light, and always light pushes darkness away. And we live in dark times and we need that light.
There are also groups in ALLMEP working under the UN Resolution 1325. Can you talk about that and principles involved with that, please?
Many of these organizations had got training on UN 1325. One of them who contributed to that is called Itaf Maaki. And they are a group of lawyers, women lawyers who help also other women find ways to resolve their own conflicts, family conflicts. But 1325 is an important framework for more women's participation in peace building and in politics. And for us as ALLMEP, we adopted that from day one, and we helped in doing training, we helped in fundraising, we helped in conferences, creating conferences for that. And I wrote an article actually about it, and it's one of the criticisms for it is that it's just like any other UN resolution that doesn't have an implementation mechanism or accountability. And so the law, the resolution is there, women believe in it, accept it, but then it's not institutionalized. Although in Palestine and in Israel, the effort to create a national UN 1325, a national plan, were executed, but still there is a lot of work that we need to do. And that's why it's part of ALLMEP's work to make it visible to all of our organizations.
So you touched on some of the things that you do for organizations to help them, a lot of different ways that you help, and also fundraising is part of that. How do you disperse funds? What is that like for an organization? What would they have to do?
That's a very good question. So let me be clear here. ALLMEP is not a funding entity. We advocate to get the money for our members. We don't apply for the money to get, because this is a conflict of interest. So we basically get funding from individuals and foundations, but we don't get money from the governments that we advocate to get USAID or the International Fund or EU to give to the space. So again, we are not a funding entity. We are an advocacy group that does the work in Europe and in the United States to keep money coming to the space. And so our latest success was the NETA LOI or MEPA, the International Fund for Palestine and Israel, being a law approved by the Congress just on December 2020. And the first call of application went out a few days ago, and we did many sessions with USAID staff and UMEPA staff with our members to answer all the questions they have. So it's important for everyone who's listening to this to know that we help people by raising their capacity to get the funding. We help by doing the advocacy to get the money. We do the communication between the donor community and our members, but we don't have control over how this money is spent, because at the end of the day, it's federal money, and only governments can do that.
I see. And apart from money, the different ways that you help your various organizations, what types of activities do you help them with?
We consult with them when it comes to doing fundraising, or they want to do visibility of their work internationally. So the advocacy part is also not for money, but for making this work visible to everyone. We also help when crises happen, especially within the organizations when violence on the ground is intense. So we help with doing training when it comes to trauma to strategy. So we know that this violence is not going to stop, but we want to know how to deal with it and how to respond to our members' needs when it comes to it. We work with alumni of programs. We created the Alumni Leadership Forum to make the alumni who do all these camps, Seeds of Peace, Kids of Peace camps, in order to continue to be engaged with the field, but also get the training that helps them get into different fields. We do storytelling programs in which we make the stories of women and men who are in the space visible to audiences from all over the world, to give legitimacy to this work, because again, we have many people who are against this work because it doesn't go with the norm, it's not bloody, and people don't think that it's actually working, but for us it's working. We do a lot of work with individual organizations on capacity building or cohort. We do cohort, we create partnerships for our members. We bring the donors to our space every time they visit. We do a lot of political advocacy with the political entities on the ground here and internationally. And you can go to our website, allmep.org, and you can see there is like all kinds of services that you can get by being part of ALLMEP.
Does that cost money for membership?
Yes, it's part of the deal based on whatever budget that the organizations have. Sometimes it's very symbolic, and in other times it's significant depending on the organization. And we're building towards a system that give more to the small organizations by raising their capacity to raise more money and be able to be members. But it's a paid membership.
ALLMEP emphasizes track 2 diplomacy. Can you define what that is and why that focus is important, please?
Yeah, this is one of the most important roles that ALLMEP is playing, because there was always this belief that there is disconnect between track 1 and track 2, which is our work as individuals to promote different ways of dealing with the conflict. So we are the communication channel between what happens on the ground that informs policies. So some of our organizations are policy oriented, and we do a lot of that work with track one leaders all over the world, locally and regionally.
We've touched a little bit that, that definitely you have an arm that works with women organizations. Out of curiosity, what do you think the differences are between men and women peacemakers? Do they have different approaches or?
Absolutely. Men are also victims of the way they are raised. You have to be tough, you cannot be emotional, and women often are accused of being emotional as if it's a weakness, and we proved by research that it's not the case. And we've learned from cases in the world, like the Liberian case, in which women who had nothing, almost nothing, managed in 4 years to take down one of the worst warlords. And we brought these women leaders to Palestine and Israel. They gave us training and they marched with us, like the Peace Laureate Lima Bowie, who's one of our partners, who shows up for events with Palestinian and Israeli women and support their work, because, for us, it's not about being in public office. We want to be in a public office. We want to create a model that does not, is not Margaret Thatcher's model. A woman who's in men's suit in order to survive in politics, she needs to be a man more than a woman. We want to create that model, and we want to learn from other experiences. So this is one of the ways why we do a lot of training for women to be a part of the peace building community. But it's important also to know that we don't have that kind of ego when it comes to positions. We, as women, and I'm one of these women, and I hear them all the time, they are not confined by certain social or political frameworks. They break out of them. And for me, that's step one in liberation. And from there, when they come to the political arena, they are not acting as if this is their own territory and nobody should come into it. They don't hold to the position rather than holding to the dreams and ambitions of the people who elected them. So I see potential when it comes to women when they are leading. I think the systems around us always put them down, including the religious system. And for that, most of our effort as feminist, inclusive political activists is to reclaim that place, that women can lead and their leadership is different. And there is research that supports that women who participate in negotiations are more likely to have these peace agreements executed and implemented without getting into an impasse because of the competition over positions.
Well, I did want to share, everybody knows about, or I think people do in general, that how well Israel does in the technology field. And I wanted to share a little clip of just one of your members that you support called Tech to Peace. A short little clip here.
In Tech to Peace, we're encouraging the participants to share their emotions, beliefs, thoughts, visions, in order to understand the other side, which will promote a culture for peace.
As one who grew up in Hebron, it's a life-changing experience.
We got to work together to get to know each other better and to trust one another more, and it was really nice to know new people and to do this kind of improvising together.
In addition to the dialogue, we have high-tech sessions that include computer programming, 3D design, and application development.
I just, I love that because we have Israelis and Palestinians working together on, technology is always forward moving. So it really shows the forward movement of ALLMEP organizations and working together. So did you want to share anything about that particular organization?
When you work with youth, especially in Palestine and Israel, especially Palestine, because it's a very young nation. The maiden age in the West Bank is 21, in Gaza is 16, and their only way to communicate with world is to be very creative when it comes to technology. And I know many, many young Palestinians who are working for high-tech organizations in Israel. So this is one way of doing peace building in a serious way. When you speak to the new language of the world, when you become part of the community that is youth community and wants to do work on skills level, but also at the same time not ignore the issues that are, or the elephants in the room. And I see this as an innovative way of making peace and building relationships. And if this is what the youth want, we should help and support and get them to do that. And I'm very, very proud of the Palestinian and Israeli Tech to Peace or other organizations within ALLMEP that is doing tech, and they don't say that they are peace organizations, they are tech organizations, but it's an environment where you provide some sort of an equal setting for people to come together.
My last question to you is, if you could talk to the world, what would you want them to know about ALLMEP?
That they should know that ALLMEP is a network that is not selfish. First of all, we're not looking for successes on a personal level. We want this field to grow, to scale, because we want millions of Israelis and Palestinians to be engaged in this space, because we see this as the only way in order to change the status quo. And we know that there are other attempts to end the status quo that didn't work. We're not against anybody. We are not for anyone. We are only here to help our members reach their potential. And if that potential has to do with going on a demonstration against settlements or working with settlers, we're here to do that. We are all for inclusivity, and we will not turn anyone away. We will not stand against any theory of change. We will always be there to support every organization that wants to bring peace or make peace using whatever theory of change. We will always be there for them to consult whether it's working or not. But most importantly, when violence that is now part of our life is raging and the blood is in the streets, we want to be there for our members and their constituencies to use the language that represents them to communicate to the world. At the end of the day, Israel and Palestine is not about blood. And this is the story that we ALLMEP wants the whole world to know, that it's also about cooperation, about building, about bringing people together on equal footing, about fighting injustice in ways that can actually change the conflict dynamics and end the occupation and end the conflict. This is the only way to do it, for us at least. And we're not against any other people who see it differently, but we also don't stand short when it comes to people who attack us. We will not accept people who come against us and say that this is not working. We all invite people to come and our members. And if it's not working for these people, then there is no imposing whatsoever, but they should believe that this is also part of the narrative in Palestine and Israel. This is an existing narrative that is not very much covered. And thanks to you, Penny, you're giving us the space here through your podcast to educate people about a third narrative that is full of hope and full of love to the world, but also gives people here a chance to be their own true self rather than being imposed on identities.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Huda. We've learned so much from you, and thanks to ALLMEP. Next week, we'll be interviewing Rabbi Dr. Ron Kronish. Kronish is the founding director of the Interreligious Coordinating Council in Israel, or ICCI. He's retired now, and he's a noted rabbi, author, speaker, blogger, and consultant. He's lived in Jerusalem for the past 38 years, and he was educated at Brandeis University and Hebrew Union College and the Jewish Institute of Religion and Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's got a doctorate in philosophy and history of education. He's lectured all over the US and Europe and the Far East on topics related to peace building, interreligious dialogue, coexistence, education, and contemporary Israel. Moreover, he's a library fellow at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute, where his research focuses on interreligious dialogue in Israel as a form of peace building. He's recently finished writing a book on this theme entitled The Other Peace Process, Interreligious Dialogue, A View from Jerusalem. And we hope you'll join us September 27th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. To our listeners today and those listening to the recording later, thank you, and may we all live in peace, shalom, and salam.